After 7 years away with the Navy SEALs, Ronan Halstead returned home and found his elderly mother sitting in the freezing snow, a rope tied from her ankle to the porch post. Beside her, Bramble, an aging black and gold German shepherd, pressed close to keep her warm and stood between her and anyone he did not trust. Marlowe claimed everything was fine, but the cold house, missing medicine, and fear in her eyes told Ronan otherwise. Then Bramble began leading him toward forgotten places, hidden papers, and clues his mother had been too afraid to reveal. What Ronan uncovered was betrayal inside his own marriage, and a plan to make his mother appear incapable so someone else could take control of her home. This time, Ronan's greatest strength would not be fighting, but staying calm long enough to protect his mother and let the truth speak. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and please like this video and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. For 7 years, Ronan Halstead had imagined coming home in 100 different ways. None of them looked like this. The road into Bright Pine Valley curved between tall white pines heavy with fresh snow, then descended toward Lake Evermere, where the frozen water stretched beneath a pale winter sun like a sheet of hammered silver. Smoke rose from distant chimneys. Red barns stood against white fields. Christmas wreaths hung from porch rails, even though the holiday was still weeks away. It was the kind of northern Minnesota afternoon that made winter look gentle. Ronan knew better. At 55, the former Navy SEAL had spent enough years studying weather, terrain, rooms, and people to understand that beautiful things could still be dangerous. He sat straight behind the wheel of his dark Ford Bronco, broad shoulders filling the long-sleeved green camouflage shirt he still preferred even during his transition out of active service. At 6'1", Ronan had the solid build of a man who trained every morning without needing anyone to remind him. His body was strong without being bulky, his movements economical rather than showy. His clean-shaven face was sharply masculine, with a square jaw, strong chin, and lines beside his eyes that had not been there 7 years earlier. His neatly kept undercut was dark ash brown, touched heavily with silver at the temples. But it was his eyes people remembered, deep blue-gray, quiet, watchful, and, according to his mother, much sadder than he believed. He had not warned anyone he was coming, that was the point. His mother, Marlowe, would probably scold him for driving through winter country without calling first. His wife, Celeste, would put both hands on her hips and tell him surprises were only romantic when they did not involve 3 hours of wondering whether there was enough food in the refrigerator. Ronan almost smiled at the thought. He expected his mother to open the door wearing the same ridiculous flour-dusted apron she had owned since he was a teenager. He expected his wife to complain and then hug him. And somewhere in the house, he expected to finally meet Bramble. 3 years earlier, after Ronan's father died, he had asked an old friend to help find Marlowe a dog. He had wanted something mature, calm, and large enough to make an elderly woman feel less alone in a house beside the woods. That was how Bramble had entered her life. Ronan had seen the German shepherd countless times over video calls. He had never touched him. The Bronco rounded the final bend. Willow Hearth house appeared beyond the trees. Ronan's smile disappeared. The house looked almost exactly as he remembered it. 2 stories of weathered cedar, a broad front porch, stone chimney, and dark green shutters his father had painted twice because Marlowe rejected the first shade. But something was wrong. There was no smoke from the chimney. Ronan slowed. No tire tracks crossed the driveway except an older set partly buried by last night's snow. No footprints led from the porch, and the front door was bare. Every winter, Marlowe hung a pine wreath there. She had done it even the year Ronan's father died because, as she had said, grief did not get to cancel Christmas. The empty door bothered him more than it should have. His training had taught him that instinct was rarely magic. Usually, instinct was the brain recognizing details faster than the conscious mind could name them. The Bronco stopped. Ronan saw the chair, then the woman sitting in it. For one terrible second, he did not recognize his own mother. "Mama?" He was out of the vehicle before the engine had fully settled. Marlowe Halstead was 73, a small woman who had spent 36 years as an elementary school librarian and somehow developed the ability to silence an entire room of children merely by lowering one eyebrow. Age had thinned her frame, but not her dignity. Her face was softly oval and lined around the mouth and hazel eyes, and her silver hair was gathered into the same low bun she had worn for decades. Today, however, the woman in the chair looked diminished. Her cream sweater showed beneath an old gray-brown wool coat torn at one elbow. A thin blanket covered her knees. Her skin looked pale from the cold. Pressed tightly against her legs was a German shepherd, Bramble, 8 years old. His coat was rich honey gold beneath a broad black saddle with faint silver beginning around his muzzle. His body remained powerful and balanced despite his age. Both ears stood alert except for a small V-shaped notch along the edge of the left one. Amber-brown eyes locked onto Ronan. Then Ronan saw the rope. It ran from beneath the blanket, around Marlowe's ankle, to the porch post. It was not tight. There was no blood, no torn skin. That almost made it worse. The rope had not been placed there to injure her. It had been placed there to keep her from leaving. Ronan moved. Bramble exploded to his feet. The shepherd positioned himself between Marlowe and Ronan with astonishing speed, shoulders forward, head lowered. A warning growl rolled through his chest. Ronan stopped instantly. Every furious instinct inside him screamed to reach his mother. Every disciplined instinct told him that the dog was doing exactly what he had been asked years ago to do. Protect her. "It's all right," Ronan said quietly. Bramble did not care. To the dog, Ronan was a large stranger rushing toward an elderly woman who smelled of fear and cold. Then Marlowe opened her eyes. At first, confusion passed across her face, then recognition. Her lips parted. "Ro?" That single childhood nickname hit harder than any greeting could have. Ronan swallowed. "I'm home, Mama." Marlowe's eyes filled. Bramble glanced back at her. "Bramble?" she whispered, placing one trembling hand against his shoulder. "That's Ronan." The shepherd looked at Ronan again. He did not immediately move. Instead, Bramble studied Marlowe first, as though her face mattered more than her words. Only when her fingers relaxed in his fur did the growl stop. The dog stepped sideways. Ronan dropped to his knees beside his mother. His hands shook as he untied the rope. That frightened him more than the rope itself. His hands had remained steady in places where men were shooting at him. Now he could barely work a simple knot. "Who did this?" Marlowe looked toward the snowy yard. "Help me inside first." He lifted her carefully. She weighed far less than he remembered. Bramble remained so close that Ronan nearly tripped over him twice. Under any other circumstances, his mother would have laughed. Nobody laughed now. Inside, the cold struck him immediately. Not outdoor cold, house cold. The kind that seeped into walls when heat had been gone too long. Ronan carried Marlowe to the sofa and wrapped 2 quilts around her before checking the thermostat. Off. He stared at it. "Ronan." He looked back. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Make a conclusion before you know the story." He held her gaze. "Then tell me the story." She smiled faintly. It was the smile she used when refusing to answer difficult questions. That frightened him too. The furnace came alive with a metallic groan. Ronan opened the refrigerator. 3 cans of soup, half a carton of milk near its expiration date, butter, 2 eggs, a jar of mustard. On the bottom shelf sat several neatly wrapped containers of dog food. Ronan closed his eyes briefly. His mother had apparently made sure Bramble ate better than she did. That, at least, sounded like her. He heated tomato soup and added bread from the freezer. Marlowe sat at the kitchen table with Bramble against her chair. As warmth slowly returned to the room, some color returned to her cheeks. Ronan placed the bowl in front of her. "What happened outside?" "Oh, that." His jaw tightened. "Yes, that." Marlowe broke a piece of bread. "I've been wandering lately." Ronan said nothing. "Celeste worries I'll walk toward the lake without noticing." "You wandered outside, sat down, tied a rope around your own ankle, and attached yourself to the porch?" Marlowe gave him a look. "Don't be sarcastic with your mother after 7 years." For half a second, he almost laughed. Almost. Then Bramble stood. The dog's eyes were fixed on Marlowe's hand. She had pushed up her sleeve, reaching for the soup. Around her wrist was a faint yellow-purple mark. Not fresh, not severe, but unmistakable. Ronan saw it. Marlowe saw him see it. She immediately pulled the sleeve down. And Bramble did something stranger. He moved around the chair and pressed his body against her injured side, then looked directly at Ronan. Once, twice, then toward the front door. Ronan felt the room change. There was nothing supernatural in the dog's behavior. Bramble did not know what bruises meant in court or why humans lied. But he knew this woman. He knew where she hurt, and he knew which door she watched when she was afraid. Ronan lowered himself into the chair opposite her. His voice became softer. "How long?" Marlowe stared into the soup. "Ro, how long has Celeste been doing this?" Marlowe finally looked up. There was no confusion in her hazel eyes, no wandering mind, only sorrow. "Celeste is tired." Ronan's stomach tightened. "That wasn't my question. Marriage to a man who's never home can make a person tired." There it was. Not an answer. A defense. Marlowe was protecting Celeste, and somehow protecting him from what Celeste had become. Ronan wanted to push. Instead, he took a breath. Years in the teams had taught him another lesson. Frightened people sometimes protected the very truth that could save them, because truth carried consequences. So he changed the subject, for now. "When is she coming home?" "I don't know." That answer was worse. Twilight turned the snow outside blue. By 6, the house had finally warmed. Ronan repaired a loose seal beneath the kitchen door, carried firewood inside, and quietly checked every window latch without announcing what he was doing. Bramble followed him. Not affectionately, more like an inspector. When Ronan carried the last armful of wood toward the hearth, Bramble stole one of his gloves from the bench. "Really?" The German shepherd stood 6 feet away, glove hanging from his mouth. For the first time that day, Marlowe laughed. It was weak, but genuine. "Bramble likes you. He's committing theft. He has standards. He only steals from people he approves of." Ronan held out his hand. Bramble considered him for several seconds before dropping the glove. That tiny exchange warmed something the furnace could not reach. At 7:14 p.m., headlights swept across the windows. Bramble changed instantly. The relaxed shepherd stood. His ears rose. Marlowe's laughter disappeared. Ronan noticed both. The front door opened. Celeste Halstead stepped inside carrying a leather handbag and a paper shopping sack. At 37, Celeste was striking without appearing delicate. Slender, poised, with high cheekbones, pale green eyes, and shoulder-length chestnut hair shaped into soft waves. She wore a charcoal turtleneck, fitted black trousers, and dark brown ankle boots. Even after years in a small northern town, Celeste retained the polished precision of the office manager she had once been. She had also once been warm. Ronan remembered that most painfully. Celeste looked up. The bag slipped half an inch in her hand. "Ronan?" Her face emptied, only for a heartbeat. Then everything returned at once. Surprise, smile, tears. "Oh my God." She crossed the room and wrapped both arms around him. Ronan returned the embrace, but he was listening to her breathing. Too fast. "I was going to surprise you," he said. "You succeeded." She pulled back and touched his face. "You didn't call." "I know." Her eyes moved past him, toward Marlowe, toward Bramble, then back. Ronan asked quietly, "Why was my mother tied to the porch?" Celeste's expression changed into concern with almost frightening smoothness. "She didn't tell you?" "Tell me what?" "She's been getting confused." Marlowe lowered her eyes. Celeste continued, "She went outside twice last week without a coat. Today she kept insisting she was walking to Nora's. I was terrified she'd fall on the road." "So you tied her to a post?" "It wasn't like that." "What was it like?" Celeste glanced at Marlowe. Bramble rose. He walked between the two women, no growl, no teeth. He simply stood there. Celeste stopped moving. Ronan noticed. He noticed everything. "I was gone less than an hour," Celeste said. "It was a safety line, loose enough that she could sit comfortably." Ronan looked toward his mother. "Is that true?" Marlowe remained silent. Bramble stayed between them. Ronan felt the old discipline settle over him. Anger wanted an answer immediately. Love wanted the truth. Those were not always the same thing, so he nodded once. "Okay." Celeste blinked. "Okay?" "For tonight." Something in her shoulders relaxed. Something in Bramble's did not. Ronan lay awake in his childhood bedroom long after midnight. The room still held an old photograph of his father beside Lake Evermere and a shelf where 3 high school trophies gathered dust. Home should have felt familiar. Instead, every creak sounded like a question. His mother had defended Celeste. Celeste had called the rope a safety line. Bramble had positioned himself between them twice, and Marlowe's wrist carried a bruise she did not want him to see. At 2:07 a.m., a soft scratching came from the other side of his door. Ronan sat up. Scratch, pause, scratch. He opened it. Bramble stood in the dark hallway. The shepherd stared at him, turned, walked several steps, then looked back. "What?" Bramble continued. Ronan followed barefoot through the silent house, past the kitchen, past the staircase, toward the narrow hall at the rear. Bramble stopped before a small basement door. The dog did not scratch it, did not bark. He simply sat, then looked at Ronan. Then at the door. Ronan studied him. There was no magic in those amber eyes, no human understanding of secrets, only memory, habit, and loyalty. Ronan placed one hand on the cold doorknob. Behind him, Bramble lowered himself to the floor as if he had finally brought someone exactly where he needed to be. For months, when the rest of Willow Hearth belonged to someone else, this had been the door Marlowe walked through at night, and Bramble had always followed her. Morning came to Willow Hearth quietly. Sunlight poured through the eastern windows and scattered across the old pine floor in long golden rectangles. Outside, fresh snow rested on the branches surrounding Lake Evermere, bright enough beneath the winter sun to make the world look almost untouched. Inside the house, Ronan Halstead knew better. He had slept perhaps 2 hours. Years in the Navy had taught him how to function after worse nights, but exhaustion was not what weighed on him now. It was the strange contradiction of being surrounded by childhood familiarity while feeling as though he had entered somebody else's home. At 6:30, he found his mother already awake. Marlowe sat at the kitchen table with both hands around a mug of tea. Her silver hair was gathered into its neat low bun, and she wore the same old cream sweater beneath her gray-brown wool coat, as if she had forgotten that a coat was no longer necessary indoors. Bramble rested beneath her chair. The 8-year-old German shepherd opened his amber eyes when Ronan entered, watched him for a moment, then lowered his head again. Ronan poured coffee. Neither spoke about the night. He waited until Celeste left the house shortly after 8, saying she needed to collect groceries and handle errands in town. Only when the sound of her car disappeared down the snowy road did Ronan stand. "I'm going downstairs." Marlowe's fingers tightened around the mug. "There isn't anything interesting down there." "I didn't say there was." That silenced her. Ronan crossed the rear hallway and opened the basement door. Cold air rose from below. The stairs were narrow and unfinished, groaning beneath his boots. At the bottom, he expected storage. Old Christmas decorations, his father's fishing equipment, perhaps boxes of things nobody could bring themselves to throw away. Instead, there was a room. Not a bedroom. A place someone had tried to turn into one. A narrow single bed stood against the concrete wall. 2 mismatched blankets were folded at its foot. Beside it sat a cheap electric heater, its power cord browned near the plug from repeated overheating. Ronan crouched. The plastic casing around the cord had begun to split. His jaw hardened. On a small wooden table stood a reading lamp, several library books, a glass of water, and prescription bottles. There was a ceramic bowl on the floor. Bramble had been painted crookedly across its side in blue letters. Another folded blanket rested beside the bed, covered with black and gold dog hair. Ronan remained still. Nothing in the room was dramatic. That was what made it unbearable. Nobody had imprisoned his mother in a dungeon. She had simply been reduced, piece by piece, until this unfinished basement had somehow become acceptable. Marlowe appeared halfway down the stairs. "I like it here." Ronan turned. She gave him an almost cheerful smile. "It's quieter." "You had a bedroom upstairs." "I still have a bedroom." "Then why are your pills down here?" Her smile weakened. Ronan pointed toward the heater. "That thing could start a fire." "It works." "That's not the same thing." Marlowe came down another step. "Row, please." There was no fear in the words, only exhaustion. Ronan looked away before answering. Okay. He did not argue. Not because he believed her, because forcing the truth from someone was still force, and his mother had apparently lived with enough of that already. He spent the next hour looking without touching more than necessary. Marlowe's old bedroom upstairs was no longer really hers. The floral quilt remained on the bed, but half the room had been consumed by garment bags, storage boxes, expensive shoes, and seasonal clothing belonging to Celeste. One closet was packed so tightly that Marlowe's dresses had been pushed to the far corner. In the kitchen, Ronan found unpaid envelopes beneath a stack of catalogs. Electric company, property tax reminder, pharmacy notice, nothing catastrophic by itself. Together, they formed a pattern. Then he checked his mother's purse. Her wallet contained $12, a library card, her medical insurance card, and an expired photograph of Ronan in uniform. No bank card. Mom. Marlowe looked up from the sofa. Where's your debit card? Celeste keeps it. Why? She's better with online things. Ronan stared at her. And your car keys? Somewhere. Where? I don't remember. The words came too quickly. He had known his mother his entire life. Marlowe forgot where she placed reading glasses. She forgot whether she had added salt to soup. She did not forget where she kept car keys. Ronan walked to the small telephone table. The modern smartphone he had bought her 2 Christmases earlier was gone. In its place sat an old basic phone with large buttons. He picked it up. No internet? I don't need internet. You used to send me pictures every other day. Most of them were blurry. That's beside the point. A tiny smile appeared. Some were extremely blurry. Ronan almost smiled back. Then he noticed the prescription bottle near her chair. Only 3 blood pressure tablets remained. The refill date should have been weeks earlier. Something cold settled behind his ribs. Not rage. Something more useful. Recognition. This had not happened in one terrible afternoon. It had happened slowly enough that each new loss could be explained away. After Marlowe's fall 2 years earlier, Celeste had begun helping with household payments. That made sense. Then she handled banking passwords, then transportation, then groceries, then communication, each step small enough to resemble assistance, until assistance became authority, and authority became dependence. Shortly before noon, Bramble began pacing near the front window. Ronan looked outside. A woman stood beyond the fence. She was waving. Marlowe froze. Not dramatically, just enough. Then she whispered, "Nora." The woman approaching the porch was 68-year-old Nora Bellamy, Marlowe's closest neighbor and friend of nearly 25 years. Nora was short and pleasantly round, with winter-pink cheeks, pale blue eyes, and short silver blonde hair curling around her ears beneath a knitted cap. A moss-green parka made her look even smaller against the snowy yard. She had spent most of her life teaching elementary school and possessed the warm, gently nosy temperament of someone who believed no problem had ever been made worse by coffee and a properly buttered biscuit. She stopped when Ronan opened the door. Her eyes widened. "Well, I'll be damned." "Nice to see you too, Nora." She hugged him before he could object. Then she leaned back. "You got old." "So did you." "I was already old. That's different." For the first time that morning, Marlowe laughed. Nora heard it. Her expression changed, only slightly, but Ronan noticed. She entered and hugged Marlowe longer than an ordinary greeting required. "I've missed Wednesdays," Nora said. Marlowe looked down. Ronan leaned against the counter. "What happens Wednesdays?" Nora glanced between them. "Coffee. For 17 years, unless one of us was sick, snowed in, or temporarily furious with the other." Marlowe sighed. "Nora." "What? It's true." "When did she stop coming?" Ronan asked. Nora's humor faded. "Late summer, maybe 6 months." Marlowe stirred her tea. Nora continued carefully. "At first I called. Celeste said Marlowe was tired. Then she said she was forgetting appointments. Then she said visits upset her." Ronan looked at his mother. Nora's voice softened. "I came by twice anyway." "What happened?" No one answered. "I was home," Marlowe said. The room went still. Nora stared at her. "What?" Marlowe seemed surprised by her own admission. "I could hear you knocking. Why didn't you open the door?" Marlowe's eyes drifted toward the hallway. She said nothing. Bramble rose from beneath the table. He walked over to Nora and placed his head against her knee. Nora touched his ear, then her eyes filled. "Oh, sweetheart." Ronan could not tell whether she meant Bramble or Marlowe, perhaps both. And for one strange moment, something happened that Ronan would remember later. Bramble left Nora, walked to Marlowe, and gently pushed his muzzle beneath her hand. Marlowe automatically began stroking his head. Her breathing slowed, her shoulders relaxed. Nora watched the dog, then whispered almost to herself, "Every time I came to that door, I heard him on the other side." Ronan looked at her. "Barking?" "No." She shook her head. "Scratching." That simple word landed harder than it should have. Bramble had known Nora, had recognized someone Marlowe trusted, and while Marlowe stayed silent behind a closed door, the dog had apparently tried to reach it. There was no miracle in that, no prophecy, only loyalty frustrated by a barrier it could not understand. Yet Ronan felt an unexpected ache behind his eyes. For months, his mother had been surrounded by people, and somehow the one creature that could not speak had been the one making the most noise. After Nora left, Ronan did not interrogate Marlowe. Instead, he repaired a kitchen cabinet and replaced the dangerous extension cord in the basement heater with a temporary safer setup until the room could be abandoned entirely. Ordinary work steadied him. By evening, Celeste returned with groceries. She behaved almost perfectly normally. She unpacked vegetables, asked Ronan whether he preferred chicken or beef for dinner, and complained mildly about tourists driving too slowly on icy roads. If Ronan had not seen the basement, he might have believed everything. During dinner, Celeste mentioned that Marlowe had forgotten an appointment recently. Marlowe's fork stopped, only briefly. Celeste continued, "She's not quite herself anymore." Ronan cut a piece of chicken. "What does Dr. Sloan think?" Celeste looked up. "About what?" "Her memory." The hesitation lasted less than a second. "He knows she's getting older." "That's not what I asked." Celeste took a drink of water. "We haven't needed a full evaluation." Ronan nodded. Nothing more. But he saw it. So did Marlowe. Celeste changed the subject. Later that evening, Ronan found his mother standing alone beside the kitchen sink. "You don't have to prove anything tonight," he told her. She looked through the window at the snow. "I don't know when helping became something else." Ronan waited. "After I fell," she continued, "Celeste paid the hospital bills, then the electricity, then the taxes. She said passwords confused me." "Did they?" Marlowe gave him an offended look. "I cataloged 12,000 books before computers did half the work." That was his mother. Ronan almost smiled, then she lowered her voice. "Things became easier if I stopped arguing." There it was. Not everything, but something true. At midnight, the house settled into silence. Ronan remained awake reading an old book in his room when soft footsteps moved through the hall. Then came a familiar scrape. He opened the door. Bramble was waiting. This time the dog moved toward the front of the house, past Marlowe's old bedroom, past the stairs, into the small office Celeste used for household paperwork. The door stood partly open. Bramble entered and stopped beside a wastebasket. He lowered his nose, sniffed, then looked at Ronan. Ronan crouched. Several torn pieces of paper lay beneath ordinary receipts. He pulled nothing apart at first. Then he recognized handwriting. Marlowe's. Her name appeared across one torn fragment. Ronan carefully lifted the pieces onto the desk. Most were meaningless alone. A signature line, a property description, a partial legal heading. Then he found one strip large enough to read. 3 words. Transfer of title. Ronan remained motionless. Bramble sat beside him. The dog had not discovered a crime. He had smelled paper that carried Marlowe's scent in a place where her things did not belong. That was all. But sometimes all destiny required was one creature noticing what another had learned to ignore. Ronan looked toward the dark hallway, then back at the torn document. For the first time since coming home, the cold inside Willow Hearth had a shape, and it was no longer winter. Ronan waited until the house was quiet before making the call. The torn paper he had found the night before remained on the kitchen table beneath an empty coffee mug, flattened carefully between two clean sheets of printer paper so the pieces would not shift. He had photographed every fragment exactly where he found it before touching anything else. That habit came from years of learning that memory was useful, but documentation was stronger. Outside, the morning sun climbed above the pine ridge and turned Lake Evermere into a field of blue-white light. The sky was almost painfully clear, the kind of bright northern morning that made every shadow sharp. Inside Willow Hearth, Ronan felt as though he had been walking through fog for days. He dialed a number he had not used in nearly 4 years. Tessa Vale answered on the third ring. Halstead? Her voice had not changed, still calm, still precise. Ronan leaned against the kitchen counter. I need legal advice. There was a pause. That sentence usually means you've already done something stupid. I haven't. Then this may be a historic morning. Despite himself, Ronan almost smiled. Tessa Vale was 41, an old Bright Pine classmate who had eventually become an attorney specializing in property disputes and elder protection in Duluth. She was tall for a woman, around 5'7", with a straight, athletic posture and a rectangular face softened by warm brown eyes. Her auburn hair was cut into a neat chin-length bob, with a few premature silver strands near her temples that she refused to dye because, as she once told Ronan, I earned every one of them. She had always been composed, even as a teenager. When other people raised their voices, Tessa tended to lower hers. That quality had become stronger after her own grandmother lost nearly everything to a relative who manipulated financial documents during the last years of her life. The experience pushed Tessa toward elder law and left her with very little patience for people who confused trust with permission. Ronan told her only what he could prove, not what he suspected. The missing bank card, the old phone, the medications, the basement room, the torn transfer document, the fact that Marlowe's name appeared on it. Tessa listened without interrupting. When Ronan finished, he said, I'm talking to Celeste today. No. The answer came immediately. Ronan stared toward the window. Tessa. No. If she's trying to take my mother's property, then telling her what you know before you know what she has is exactly the wrong thing to do. Ronan said nothing. Tessa continued. Observe, preserve copies. Keep your mother physically safe. Those are your jobs. I can get answers. You can get a confrontation. Her tone softened. Ro, this isn't a raid. If there are documents, accounts, messages, or witnesses involved, anger is not evidence. The words irritated him because they were correct. What do I do first? Get your mother medically evaluated. Ronan frowned. She's fine. You know that. I believe you. Neither of those things is a medical record. That landed. Tessa gave him the name of someone Ronan already knew. Dr. Everett Sloan, Marlowe's family physician. Ronan looked toward the hallway. All right. And Ronan? Yeah? If your mother has been made to believe she's confused, don't treat the appointment like you're testing whether she's broken. His expression tightened. I'm not. Good. Tessa paused. Then make sure she knows that. Doctor. Everett Sloan's clinic stood near the eastern edge of Bright Pine, beside a pharmacy and a bakery that had been there longer than Ronan could remember. Everett was 64, tall and slightly stooped, with a narrow face, broad forehead, and neatly trimmed silver mustache. His short white hair had thinned at the crown, and he wore rimless glasses that constantly slid low on his nose whenever he read. A pale blue shirt showed beneath a gray cardigan and white medical coat. He had the gentle manner of a man who never entered a room as though he were more important than the person waiting inside it. That quality had been shaped, in part, by losing his older brother to a heart attack decades earlier, after the man spent months insisting that discomfort was nothing worth bothering a doctor about. Everett had never again treated silence as proof that someone was fine. Marlowe sat on the examination table with her hands folded in her lap. I don't like being examined for crimes I haven't committed. Everett smiled. Good. That means you're still yourself. Ronan stood near the wall. Marlowe gave him a look. And you can stop hovering. I'm standing. You're standing aggressively." Everett looked at Ronan over his glasses. "She's right." For 20 minutes, Everett asked Marlowe ordinary questions. The date, the season, recent events, medication, finances, her daily routine. He asked her to remember a short list of words and recall them later. He asked about the difference between selling a house and allowing someone to manage household expenses. He asked what she would do if someone presented a contract she did not understand. Marlowe answered calmly. Once she forgot the exact date by 1 day. She remembered everything else. Everett eventually removed his glasses. "There are normal age-related changes," he said. "Nothing here suggests impaired decision-making." Ronan felt something loosen inside his chest. Marlowe did not. She looked angry, not at Everett, at the idea that anyone had needed to prove it. "Could someone say otherwise?" she asked. "Someone can say almost anything." Everett's voice remained gentle. "That doesn't make it medically true." Marlowe stared at her hands. For several seconds the room was silent. Then Everett noticed something. "You stopped refilling your blood pressure medication regularly." Marlowe did not answer. Ronan looked at her. "Why?" "I had enough." "No, you didn't." Everett intervened before the conversation hardened. "We'll refill it today." Marlowe nodded, but Ronan saw the embarrassment in her face. He understood then that losing control had done something more damaging than inconvenience her. It had trained her to feel guilty for needing things. They returned to Willow Hearth just after noon. Celeste was not home. The sunlight had softened, and a breeze moved loose snow across the yard in thin silver ribbons. Bramble greeted Marlowe at the door with surprising enthusiasm. The German shepherd circled her once, pushed his nose against her palm, then trotted toward the rear of the property. "Bramble," Marlowe called. He stopped, looked back, then continued toward the trees. Ronan watched him. "Does he usually wander?" "No." Marlowe frowned. "Not without me." Ronan followed. Bramble crossed the packed path behind the house and moved toward an old white pine standing near the edge of the property. He lowered his nose and began sniffing the snow around its roots. Ronan stopped several feet away. There was something familiar about the tree. Then he remembered a photograph Nora had shown him the previous day while scrolling through her phone. Marlowe, last autumn, standing beneath this pine, Bramble beside her. Marlowe came up behind Ronan. Her breathing changed, only slightly. "What's under there?" "Nothing." The answer came too fast. Bramble scraped the snow once, then again. Ronan looked at his mother. She closed her eyes. "Oh." That single word told him enough. Ronan knelt and began moving the snow aside with gloved hands. Several inches down, his fingers touched plastic. He pulled free a weather-sealed storage box. Marlowe stood very still. Bramble sat beside her. Ronan did not open it immediately. "Yours?" She nodded. "Why here?" "I needed somewhere Celeste didn't look." The answer was barely audible. Ronan lifted the lid. Inside lay a life compressed into evidence. A certified copy of the property deed, several utility statements, a small notebook, photocopies of documents carrying Marlowe's name, her old smartphone, and a compact digital voice recorder wrapped in a kitchen towel. Ronan stared at the phone. "You told me you didn't need it anymore." "I didn't say I threw it away." He looked up. Marlowe's expression held something new, not fear, shame. "I started hiding things when papers began disappearing from the desk." "How long ago?" "Months." "Why didn't you tell me?" Her mouth tightened. Ronan immediately regretted the force in his voice. He lowered it. "Mom." Marlowe looked away. Bramble moved closer until his shoulder touched her leg. Then, without warning, the dog lowered himself onto the snow directly between them. Not protective, not defensive, just there. Marlowe rested her hand on the black saddle of his back, and the tension in her fingers eased. Ronan watched. There was something almost painfully simple about it. A man with years of military experience stood 2 feet away, trying to find the right words. The dog needed none. Marlowe whispered, "Every time I thought about calling you, I pictured you somewhere dangerous." Ronan said nothing. Celeste knew that. His jaw tightened. Marlowe continued, "She never threatened me the way you're imagining." "What did she do?" "She reminded me." "Of what?" that you were tired, that you were under pressure, that people depended on you. Marlowe swallowed. One night I said I was going to call you. She asked me what would happen if you were distracted because of me. Ronan felt the world narrow. Marlowe looked directly at him now. She said, if he loses focus because of this and something happens to him, can you live with that? For the first time that day, Ronan had no answer. Not because the words were clever, because they had been chosen perfectly. Celeste had not needed to lock Marlowe away. She had used love as the lock. Back inside, Ronan photographed every item before moving it. Tessa stayed on speakerphone while he described what he found. Do not alter originals, she said. I know you know, I'm saying it anyway. The notebook contained dates, short entries. Asked again about West account. Changed password. Could not find deed. Celeste angry after I called bank. Other entries were almost painfully mundane. Bramble ate Nora's biscuit. Snow at 4 p.m. Roe called, sounded tired, did not tell him. That last sentence appeared more than once. Ronan stopped reading. He picked up the old phone instead. There were unsent drafts, messages addressed to him, some only a few words. Roe, can you call when alone? Another, I think something is wrong with the house papers. And another, I don't want you to worry, but I may need... It ended there. Never sent. Ronan set the phone down carefully. The voice recorder was last. Marlowe stood near the window. You don't have to listen now, she said. Yes, I do. He pressed play. Static. Then Celeste's voice. Calm. Controlled. Just sign where I marked it. Marlowe's recorded voice answered. I want someone else to read it. A chair scraped. Then another voice entered. Male. Smooth. Unhurried. Ronan had never heard it before. Mrs. Halstead, nobody is trying to take anything from you. Marlowe said something too faint to understand. The man continued. When everything is under the right name, the rest becomes easier. Ronan paused the recording. Who is that? Marlowe looked at him. Wesley Prine. The name meant nothing to Ronan, not yet. He sat down. The anger he had expected did not come. Instead, he felt tired, deeply tired. Bramble crossed the room and placed his heavy head on Ronan's knee. Ronan looked down at the dog's silvering muzzle, then at his mother. I've spent half my life protecting people. Marlowe's eyes filled. And somehow you thought you had to protect me from this. No, she shook her head. I thought I had to protect you. Ronan looked at the unsent phone in his hand. From what? From worrying about me when you were somewhere people could die. He held her gaze. His voice was quiet. Mom. He glanced toward the hidden papers, the recorder, the messages she had written and never sent. People don't only disappear when they die. Marlowe stopped breathing for a moment. Ronan swallowed. You were disappearing here. Bramble remained between them. Outside, the winter sun continued shining across Lake Evermere as if the world had nothing to confess. By the fourth morning, Willow Hearth had become quieter in a different way. Not peaceful, watchful. Ronan sat at the kitchen table with his coffee untouched while winter light spread across the floorboards. Across from him, Marlowe was reading one of her old library books as though nothing in the house had changed. Bramble lay beneath her chair with his chin between his paws, amber eyes half closed. Celeste had already left for town. Ronan's phone vibrated. Tessa. He answered immediately. I found him, she said. Ronan straightened. Wesley Prine? Yes. Tessa's tone was calm, but the clipped rhythm beneath it told him she had found more than a name. She had spent the morning reviewing county property records, planning applications, and publicly available development filings. Wesley Prine was not merely a local real estate agent. I was trying to assemble a stretch of lakefront property along the eastern curve of Lake Evermere. 2 parcels had already been purchased or placed under option agreements. A third sat between them, Willow Hearth. Ronan looked through the window toward the frozen lake. How much is the property worth? More than your mother probably realizes. How much? Tessa gave him a figure. Ronan did not react immediately. Then he leaned back. That's not possible. It is if you're valuing the land rather than the house. The cedar home, barn, trees, and old fencing were not the prize. Access was. Willow Hearth's acreage connected the county road to a stretch of shoreline deep enough for a private dock and close enough to existing utilities to make development considerably cheaper. Without Marlowe's property, the planned lakeside project became awkward. With it, the pieces aligned. Ronan's eyes moved toward his mother. She was turning a page, unaware, perhaps, that the soil beneath her feet had become more valuable to someone else than the home upon it. Tessa continued. Wesley filed preliminary documents for a lodge concept about 14 months ago. Nothing huge. 12 cabins, a central building, lake access. Why didn't anyone tell Mom? They wouldn't need to unless they were formally applying for something affecting her land. Ronan rubbed his jaw. So he needs the property. He wants it, Tessa corrected him deliberately. Don't turn motive into proof. He exhaled. You really enjoy saying things I don't want to hear. It's one of my professional strengths. Before ending the call, Tessa asked him to do nothing reckless. Again. Ronan promised. Mostly because he had learned that promises made to lawyers tended to return later wearing paperwork. Nora Bellamy arrived just before lunch carrying a covered dish large enough to feed 6 people. I made chicken casserole. Ronan looked at the dish. That could feed the National Guard. Only if they're polite. Nora removed her moss-green parka and joined Marlowe in the kitchen. The two women fell into an old rhythm almost immediately, disagreeing about whether rosemary belonged in casserole and whether a certain neighbor's new mailbox was tasteful or an act of aggression against cedar. Ronan let them talk. Then, carefully, he asked Nora whether she knew Wesley Prine. Her expression shifted. Real estate fellow? You've met him? No. She thought for a moment. But I've seen his vehicle. What vehicle? A silver SUV, expensive looking, always too clean for Bright Pine. Ronan leaned against the counter. Here? Nora nodded. Several times. Marlowe lowered her eyes. Nora continued, now less certain. I assumed he was helping Celeste with property taxes or insurance. She told me once they were reviewing paperwork because the house was getting harder for Marlowe to manage. Ronan looked at his mother. Marlowe did not speak. How often did he come? Nora frowned. Maybe 5 or 6 times that I noticed. Could have been more. Was Celeste usually here? Yes. And Mom? Usually. Something tightened in Ronan's stomach. Nora noticed. I should have asked more questions. Marlowe immediately reached for her hand. No. Marlowe? No. Her voice was firmer this time. You were my friend. You weren't my guard. Bramble lifted his head at the change in tone. Ronan watched his mother. It was one of the first times since he had returned that she had spoken without immediately apologizing for herself. The change was small, but it mattered. That afternoon, Celeste announced that she needed groceries. There isn't much left, she said, slipping on her coat. Ronan was replacing a broken latch on the equipment shed. Need help? No. The answer came too quickly, then softened. I mean, you've been working all day. Stay. Ronan nodded. Celeste drove away. He did not follow. He did not check her phone. He did not hide behind trees or turn himself into the kind of man who justified everything because he felt betrayed. Instead, he remained on his family's land and worked on the latch. 17 minutes later, Bramble changed. The shepherd had been lying in a patch of winter sunlight outside the shed, almost asleep. His head rose, both ears sharpened forward. The muscles along his back tightened beneath the black saddle of his coat. Ronan heard nothing at first. Then came the faint crunch of tires over frozen gravel. A silver SUV appeared between the trees. Bramble stood. No barking, no charge, just absolute attention. Ronan remained beside the shed. The vehicle stopped near the side of the house. A man stepped out. Wesley Prine was 43, about 6 feet tall, lean rather than muscular, with the polished posture of someone accustomed to boardrooms and client dinners rather than physical work. His face was long and angular, his cheekbones pronounced, his jaw narrower than Ronan's. Dark brown hair was combed neatly to one side with a few deliberate-looking streaks of gray at the temples. He was clean-shaven, pale from winter, and dressed in a charcoal wool coat over a black sweater, dark tailored trousers, and leather boots that looked expensive enough to resent the snow. Even from a distance, Wesley moved with practiced assurance. Not arrogance exactly, something smoother. The confidence of a man who expected doors to open because he had spent years learning which words made people unlock them. Ronan watched him walk toward the side entrance. Bramble took one step forward, then stopped. A low sound formed in his throat, not a growl, more like recognition without welcome. That mattered. Bramble knew this man. Wesley looked toward the dog. For the briefest moment, the polished expression vanished. His shoulders stiffened. Then he recovered and entered the house. Ronan did not move. He counted minutes without intending to. 12, then 18, then 26. When Wesley finally emerged, he carried no visible documents, but he looked irritated. He opened the SUV door, glanced once toward the shed, and drove away. Bramble remained standing until the vehicle disappeared. Only then did he sit. Ronan looked down at him. "You don't like him." Bramble sneezed. Ronan almost smiled. Compelling testimony. The dog ignored him. When Ronan entered the house, Celeste's office door was open. Nothing looked disturbed. That by itself meant nothing. He did not search drawers. He did not break locks. Instead, he noticed an empty space on a shelf where a thick blue folder had been sitting the previous morning. He remembered because the folder had been leaning crookedly against a row of household binders. Now it was gone. Celeste returned 40 minutes later carrying 2 grocery bags. Ronan helped her unload them. She behaved normally. Too normally, perhaps, but he was beginning to distrust that thought. Suspicion could make every ordinary gesture look rehearsed, so he said nothing. That evening, however, Marlowe asked quietly from the living room, "Where's the blue folder?" Celeste stopped. "What folder?" "The one with the house papers." "I moved it." "Where?" "Somewhere safe." Marlowe's shoulders drew inward. Ronan saw it. Celeste saw him see it. For one stretched second, the room became perfectly still. Then Celeste smiled. "Your mother keeps misplacing things." Ronan's gaze stayed on her. Marlowe did not argue. Bramble rose from the rug and walked to her side. The dog did not face Celeste this time. He faced Marlowe. He touched his nose to the back of her hand. Marlowe looked down at him. Something in her expression changed. Not fear, memory. Then she turned toward Ronan. "There was a paper in that folder." Celeste's face tightened. Marlowe continued. "It said I wasn't managing things properly." The room seemed to shrink. Celeste put down the grocery bag. "You misunderstood it. I read it. Mom, don't call me that when you're trying to make me doubt myself." The words landed with such quiet force that even Ronan did not move. This was not the frightened woman from the porch. Not entirely. Somewhere beneath months of accommodation, the old librarian who could silence a classroom with one look had returned. Celeste's composure cracked, only slightly, but enough. That moment became the chapter's re-hook, not because Marlowe revealed a secret, but because she finally recognized the shape of what had been done to her. The person being erased had begun writing herself back into the room. Later that night, Ronan called Tessa from the shed. He described the missing blue folder and what Marlowe remembered. Tessa asked him to photograph any document if it resurfaced, but not to seize anything he had no right to access. The next morning, the folder appeared again. Not hidden, not locked away. It had been returned to the office shelf. Ronan noticed because it was now standing upright. Celeste had gone to shower. Marlowe was in the kitchen. Ronan asked her directly, "Is that your folder?" She looked. "Yes." "May I open it?" Marlowe hesitated, then nodded. "It's my property paperwork." That mattered. Ronan carried it to the dining table and photographed the contents while Marlowe sat beside him. Most pages were ordinary. Tax assessments, insurance correspondence, a utility easement map. Then they found a draft document. Tessa joined by video call. Ronan held each page toward the camera. She read in silence. Her expression became increasingly severe. "This isn't a sale contract." "What is it?" "A draft authorization structure." "In English." "It creates a path for someone else to make property decisions on Marlowe's behalf." Marlowe leaned closer. Someone else who? Tessa pointed to a section. That part isn't completed. Ronan kept reading. Then he found the paragraph that changed everything. The draft stated that Marlowe Halstead had demonstrated declining capacity to independently manage financial and real property affairs. Ronan's grip tightened. Marlowe read it twice. Her face went pale. But that's not true. No, Tessa said, and Dr. Sloane's evaluation matters because of that. Ronan turned another page. Attached was a preliminary description of a possible property transfer. No completed signatures. No final authority. Nothing yet that automatically gave anyone ownership. But the intent behind the language was unmistakable. Someone had begun constructing a paper version of Marlowe that did not match the woman sitting at the table. A confused widow, unable to manage her affairs, in need of someone else to decide. Marlowe closed the folder. Her fingers trembled. Ronan put his hand over hers. Then Celeste entered the room. She stopped when she saw the folder. Her face hardened. "What are you doing?" Ronan stood, reading Mom's papers with her permission. Celeste looked at Marlowe. "You don't understand those documents." Marlowe's expression changed. Ronan recognized it. "Enough." Celeste turned toward him. "You have no idea what the last 7 years have been like. I know what I've seen in 4 days." "You've seen 4 days." Her voice rose for the first time. 7 years, Ronan." He remained still. "You know how long 7 years is?" The anger came pouring through a crack she had held shut since his arrival. 7 years of canceled plans. 7 years of waking up alone. 7 years of your mother asking when you'd be home like I had some secret schedule you forgot to give me. Ronan absorbed every word, because some of it was true. He had missed anniversaries, holidays, his father's final weeks. He had made promises and broken them for reasons that sounded noble only from far away. Celeste's eyes shone. "I waited for you." "I know." That stopped her. Ronan's voice remained low. "I know what my career cost you." Her breathing slowed. For a moment he saw the woman he had married. Then he looked at the folder. "But that doesn't make this yours." Celeste's face closed. He continued. "You could have left me." Silence. "You could have told me the marriage was over." He looked toward Marlowe. "You did not have the right to make her pay for what you hated about me." Celeste stared at him. No apology came. No confession either. She turned and walked out. Ronan did not follow. Marlowe sat silently beside the folder. Bramble came to her and rested against her knee. Outside the windows, Lake Evermere shone brilliantly beneath the afternoon sun. Beautiful, cold, and beneath the ice, far deeper than it looked. The first thing Detective Maeve Rourke did was close the folder. Not dramatically. Not because she was shocked. She simply placed both palms over it and looked at Ronan as though the papers between them mattered less than what he did next. They were sitting in a small interview room inside the Bright Pine County Public Safety Building, where winter sunlight spilled through narrow blinds and cut pale lines across the table. A radiator clicked against the far wall. Somewhere beyond the door, a printer coughed out paperwork with bureaucratic persistence. Maeve Rourke was 45, compact and solidly built, with the posture of someone who had spent years standing in kitchens, hospital corridors, and courthouse hallways, while frightened people tried to explain why everything was fine. Her face was square without being hard, her jaw cleanly defined, her dark blue eyes direct but not invasive. Black hair streaked with silver was tied low at the back of her neck. She wore an olive winter field jacket over a plain black sweater, charcoal tactical trousers, and practical snow boots. There was nothing theatrical about her. That was exactly why Ronan trusted her sooner than he expected. Maeve had begun her career in patrol, then moved into financial crimes after helping an elderly widower whose nephew had slowly emptied his accounts while telling everyone the man was becoming forgetful. The case had stayed with her because the theft itself had been almost invisible. No broken doors, no masks, just trust converted into access. Since then, Maeve had learned to distrust situations where convenience always flowed in one direction. Tessa sat beside Ronan, a legal pad open in front of her. Maeve tapped the folder. "There's enough here to concern me." Ronan leaned forward. "Concern isn't enough." "No." Maeve did not take offense. It's also not nothing. She summarized what they had. Marlowe's medical evaluation showed she remained capable of making her own decisions. Nora could describe the sudden isolation from friends. The notebook and old phone showed Marlowe had grown worried about missing papers and restricted access. The recording suggested pressure around signatures. The draft property documents raised questions about who had been constructing a narrative of declining capacity. "And the money?" Ronan asked. "Still being reviewed." Tessa folded her hands. "What we need is separation between suspicion and proof." Maeve nodded. "Exactly." Ronan stared at the closed folder. There was a rope. Maeve's expression changed slightly. "I know. She was tied outside. I know what you told me. What more do you need?" "Context that doesn't depend only on you, your mother, or your wife." Ronan's jaw tightened. Maeve did not look away. "If Celeste says it was a one-time safety measure, however terrible that sounds, I still have to establish what actually happened." "Mom won't talk about it." "Then don't force her." That answer surprised him. Maeve continued. "People who have been controlled for a long time often spend more energy defending their own choices than accusing the person controlling them. Shame gets mixed into everything." Ronan thought of Marlowe apologizing for medication she had not been able to refill. Tessa slid a copy of Nora's written statement across the table. "Nora is willing to formalize this." Maeve read it. "Good. And Dr. Sloan? He's providing the medical records with Marlowe's authorization." Maeve nodded. "Good again." Ronan asked, "And now?" "Now you stop trying to finish this alone." He almost smiled. "Everyone keeps telling me that." "Maybe you're difficult," Tessa said. "He is." For the first time that morning, Maeve smiled. Barely. Then she pointed toward Ronan. "Back up everything you legally possess. Keep originals where they are if possible. Do not bait anyone. Do not threaten anyone. If your mother feels unsafe, she leaves the house or we help arrange somewhere else." Ronan nodded. Maeve's eyes stayed on him. "And if you get angry?" "I know how to manage anger." "Most people who say that do right up until they don't." Ronan said nothing. Maeve opened the folder again. "Then prove me wrong." The following 2 days passed without explosion. That almost made them harder. Ronan scanned documents. Tessa organized copies. Nora signed a statement describing the months when Marlowe stopped visiting. Dr. Sloan sent his assessment. Celeste moved through the house with a strained version of normality. She cooked. She answered calls. She avoided long conversations with Ronan. And Marlowe began doing small things for herself again. The smallest mattered most. She chose her own breakfast. She asked Nora to drive her into town for yarn. She placed her old smartphone beside the kitchen radio, even though it still had no active service. One afternoon, Ronan found her standing at the pantry, reorganizing shelves. "Need help?" "No." "You sure?" "I have been alphabetizing things since before you knew how to tie shoes." Ronan glanced at the shelves. "Soup doesn't need to be alphabetical. That's why your life lacks structure." Bramble lay nearby, watching them. The old shepherd's tail thumped once against the floor. Ronan smiled. Healing, he was beginning to understand, sometimes looked embarrassingly ordinary. Then Bramble stood. The dog walked to the back door. He waited. Marlowe looked over. "He wants out." Ronan opened it. Bramble crossed the porch, trotted over the packed snow, and headed toward the old shed. Ronan almost ignored him. Then the dog stopped beside the eastern wall, sniffed, moved 2 feet, sniffed again, and began scratching at one warped cedar board. Not frantic, persistent. Ronan followed. "Bramble." The shepherd scraped again. Marlowe stepped onto the porch behind them. "What is he doing?" Ronan crouched beside the wall. The board had separated slightly from the frame. He remembered seeing Bramble near this corner before, but there had been nothing remarkable about it. Now the dog pushed his nose toward the gap. Ronan removed 2 old screws and eased the board outward. Something small dropped into the snow. A black plastic rectangle. Ronan stared at it. Marlowe came closer. "Oh." He picked it up. It was a trail camera. Small, weatherproof, dead battery. Nora recognized it 15 minutes later when Ronan called her. "I bought that." Marlowe pressed her fingertips against her temple. "For the raccoons." Nora laughed once. "You were furious because something kept knocking over the birdseed." "I thought it was raccoons." "It was Bramble." The German shepherd looked entirely unashamed. Ronan almost laughed. Then Marlowe's expression slowly changed. "I moved it." The humor disappeared. "When?" "I don't know. Months ago." "Why?" Marlowe stared at the camera. "I wanted to see the back porch." Nobody spoke. Then she added quietly, "I thought if I ever needed to remember something clearly, a camera wouldn't argue with me." The sentence settled over the yard. Ronan looked at the dead device differently. This was not a clever trap. It was evidence that his mother had started doubting whether her own memory would be believed. That realization hit harder than finding the camera itself. The memory card still worked. They did not watch it alone. Ronan called Tessa. Tessa called Maeve. By evening, the four of them sat in Willow Hearth's dining room with Marlowe present and consenting. The footage opened on Ronan's laptop. Maeve insisted they preserve an untouched copy first. Then they watched. Most clips were useless. Snow, squirrels, Bramble investigating the camera from 6 inches away, Nora crossing the yard with a casserole, Marlowe feeding birds, wind moving branches. Then the season changed. Leaves appeared on the trees. One clip showed Marlowe standing near the back steps with her phone. Celeste entered frame. There was no audio good enough to understand every word, but the gesture was clear. Celeste reached for the phone. Marlowe pulled it back. Celeste took it anyway. The clip ended. Another recording showed Celeste at the rear door while Bramble stood beside Marlowe. This one carried broken audio through wind. "If you keep doing this," static, "I will take him to the shelter myself." Bramble appeared in frame at the word shelter, ears upright, not because he understood the threat, but because Celeste's tone had sharpened. Marlowe said something. Celeste walked inside. Ronan's hands remained folded. Maeve watched him instead of the screen. A third clip came from colder weather. Marlowe stood near the thermostat visible through the mudroom entrance. Celeste's voice was clearer. "If you want to control the house, then pay for the heat yourself." Then she turned the thermostat down. Marlowe remained standing there long after Celeste disappeared. Ronan breathed slowly through his nose. Tessa did not speak. Then Maeve reached for the keyboard. "There's one more." The timestamp was the day Ronan came home. The footage began 10 minutes before he had arrived. Marlowe stood on the porch wearing the old coat. Celeste was beside her. Even without perfect audio, the argument was obvious. Marlowe pointed toward Nora's property. Celeste blocked the steps. Marlowe tried again. Celeste grabbed the long yard tether normally used when Bramble was outside for extended periods. Marlowe recoiled. Celeste said clearly enough, "I'm going into town. Sit down and stop making this worse." Then she looped the tether loosely around Marlowe's ankle and secured the other end to the porch post. Not tight, not violent in the cinematic sense. That made it more disturbing. It was casual, impatient, as though restricting another adult had become a solution available to her. Celeste drove away. The camera kept recording. Marlowe sat. Bramble came into frame. The German shepherd pressed against her legs. Several minutes passed. Then Marlowe leaned down and wrapped both arms around him. The old dog did not move. Ronan stopped the video. "No." Maeve looked at him. "Ronan, I've seen enough." He stood. Too fast. The chair legs struck the floor. Bramble immediately rose. Ronan crossed the room, walked through the back door, and continued into the shed. Cold air hit his face. He welcomed it. His fists were already clenched. He saw Celeste's hand, the tether, his mother sitting down, the casualness. He struck the wooden wall once, hard. Pain flashed through his knuckles. Behind him, Bramble startled and jumped backward. The sound of the dog's paws sliding across the floor stopped Ronan faster than anything else could have. He looked down. Bramble's ears were lowered, not terrified, uncertain. Ronan slowly opened his hand. Blood did not pour from it. The skin was merely scraped. But the damage was not what mattered. For 1 second, anger had filled the room so completely that even Bramble had not known who Ronan was. That realization sickened him. Marlowe appeared in the doorway. She had followed more slowly than the others. "Row." I'm fine. That wall may disagree. He stared at his hand. Marlowe stepped inside. She did not touch him. Look at Bramble. Ronan did. The German shepherd stood several feet away watching. Marlowe said softly, "He spent months learning which sounds meant trouble." Ronan closed his eyes. "Mom, don't give him another one." The words were gentle. That made them sharper. Ronan finally looked at her. "I should have been here. No. I should have known. No. I left you. You served your country. And you were sitting outside tied to a post." Marlowe's face tightened. Then she stepped closer. "Listen to me." He did. "Do not let what she did to me decide what kind of man you become." Ronan looked toward the mark his fist had left in the wood. For most of his adult life, danger had been something visible. A person, a weapon, a mission. This was different. There would be no honor in overpowering Celeste, no justice in frightening the same mother he claimed to be protecting. Bramble took one cautious step forward, then another. Ronan lowered his injured hand. The shepherd sniffed it. After several seconds, Bramble pressed his nose into Ronan's palm. Forgiveness, Ronan thought, came embarrassingly quickly to dogs. Perhaps that was why humans did not deserve them. Maeve appeared at the shed entrance. "I made the copies." Ronan nodded. "Is it enough?" Maeve studied him. "It's evidence. Not victory, not revenge. Evidence." For the first time, Ronan understood why the distinction mattered. He looked at Marlowe, then at Bramble, and finally at his open hand. All his life, he had been trained to move when danger appeared. This time, the harder mission was knowing when not to. The evidence changed the atmosphere inside Willow Hearth, but it did not change the locks. Not yet. Celeste still lived there. Her clothes remained upstairs. Her coffee cup still appeared beside the sink each morning. She still moved through the kitchen as if routines could preserve a marriage that had already begun collapsing beneath the weight of what everyone knew. Ronan found that harder than open confrontation would have been. For most of his adult life, danger had announced itself clearly enough. This did not. This looked like a woman folding laundry, a kettle boiling, a bedroom door closing softly at night. Tessa and Detective Maeve Rourke met Ronan and Marlowe at Nora's house the morning after the camera footage was preserved. Maeve was direct. "Marlowe does not have to remain under the same roof with someone she fears." Marlowe sat with both hands around a coffee mug. "I am not leaving my house." Nobody challenged her. Tessa nodded. "Then we make the house safer." They agreed that Marlowe would keep her phone with her, Nora would remain available across the property line, and Ronan would not leave his mother alone with Celeste if tension increased. Maeve also arranged for an Adult Protective Services caseworker to be available if needed. Nobody proposed a trap. Nobody asked Marlowe to provoke another confrontation. The evidence already existed. What they did not know was whether Celeste and Wesley had abandoned the property plan, or whether they believed they still had time. Ronan's job was simple. Do nothing reckless. That turned out to require more discipline than most operations he remembered. For 2 days, Celeste said almost nothing about the house. She became courteous, careful. She asked Marlowe whether she wanted tea. She replaced a carton of milk before it ran out. She even brought a small bundle of firewood inside without being asked. Ronan watched his mother struggle with that more than anger. Kindness from someone who had hurt you could be confusing in ways cruelty was not. Once, Ronan found Marlowe staring at Celeste through the kitchen doorway. "She used to be good to me," Marlowe said after Celeste went upstairs. Ronan leaned against the counter. "I know. That almost makes it worse." He understood. If Celeste had always been cruel, Marlowe could have placed everything into one simple box: monster, enemy. But human beings rarely arrived so conveniently labeled. Celeste had once driven Marlowe to doctor's appointments. She had sat beside her after Ronan's father died. She had made Thanksgiving dinner when Marlowe could barely get out of bed. Those things had been real. So were the things that came later. Ronan had begun to understand that truth did not cancel truth. Sometimes people became dangerous slowly. Sometimes love rotted without disappearing entirely. On the third evening, snow began falling again. Large, quiet flakes drifted over Lake Evermere while the windows of Willow Hearth glowed against the blue dusk. At 6:40, Celeste received a text. Ronan noticed because she immediately turned her phone face down. At 6:57, headlights appeared through the trees. Bramble stood beside Marlowe's chair. The shepherd did not bark. His ears simply lifted. Celeste looked toward the window. "Who's that?" Ronan asked. Her answer came after a beat. "Wesley." There was no longer much point pretending Ronan did not know the name. "Why is he here?" "To discuss paperwork." Marlowe's fingers stopped on the page of her book. Ronan looked at her. She looked back. For once, there was no silent request for him to rescue her from the room. Only awareness. "I'll hear what he has to say," she said. Celeste seemed surprised. So was Ronan. He sent one short message to Tessa. "He's here." Then he stayed where he was. Wesley Prine entered Willow Hearth carrying a slim leather portfolio dusted with snow. His charcoal wool coat was immaculate despite the weather, his dark hair still combed precisely into place. Only the set of his mouth suggested he was less confident than during his previous visit. He nodded to Ronan. "Mr. Halstead." "Wesley." No handshake followed. Wesley removed his coat and joined Celeste in the dining room. Marlowe sat at the head of the table. Bramble positioned himself beside her chair. Ronan remained near the doorway. Wesley opened the portfolio. "Mrs. Halstead, I think there has been some misunderstanding about what we've been trying to accomplish." Marlowe looked at the papers. "What are you trying to accomplish?" "A structure that protects the property." "For whom?" Wesley smiled faintly. "For everyone involved." Celeste sat beside him. "Nobody wants to take the house from you." Marlowe's eyes moved to her. "Then why do you need my signature?" Celeste exhaled. "Because maintaining 6 acres at your age isn't simple. I've managed it for years. With help. Help isn't ownership." Ronan felt something in the room shift. Wesley leaned forward. "This doesn't have to be adversarial." Bramble raised his head. Wesley placed several pages on the table. The documents were different from the earlier draft. Cleaner, more formal. They proposed granting authority over certain financial and real estate decisions. Marlowe did not touch the pen. Wesley placed beside them. "I want Tessa to read these." Celeste's jaw tightened. "Why does everything have to involve a lawyer now?" "Because apparently things involving my house should have involved one sooner." Wesley withdrew the pen slightly. "Mrs. Halstead, if independent management becomes difficult, there are other legal avenues." Ronan's gaze sharpened. "What avenues?" Wesley looked toward him. "I'm speaking generally." "Be specific." Wesley hesitated. "If someone is genuinely unable to manage their property, courts have mechanisms for that." Marlowe's face went still. There it was. Not a threat stated plainly enough to decorate a courtroom, but close enough that everyone understood it. Celeste leaned toward Marlowe. "You keep turning this into something ugly." Marlowe stared at her. "You tied me to my own porch." Celeste's color changed. "That happened once." Bramble stood, not toward Celeste, beside Marlowe. His shoulder touched her knee. Celeste lowered her voice. "Ronan will leave again." Ronan said nothing. Marlowe looked at her daughter-in-law for a long time. Then she asked, "If you truly believe that, why are you so afraid of him knowing the truth?" Celeste opened her mouth. Nothing came, and that silence did what accusation could not. For several seconds, the entire room seemed stripped of excuses. Wesley looked down at the paperwork. Celeste looked at Ronan. Marlowe looked at neither. She simply removed the pen from the table and placed it beside Wesley's portfolio. "I am not signing." The doorbell rang. Celeste turned. Ronan did not. He already knew. Tessa entered first, still wearing her navy wool coat, auburn hair dampened by snow. Maeve followed. With them was a woman Ronan had met only briefly that afternoon. Helen Dacre, 53, was an Adult Protective Services caseworker with a medium height, sturdy build, warm brown skin, and short dark hair threaded with gray. She wore simple glasses, a burgundy winter coat, and carried no visible authority beyond a canvas satchel and the calm expression of someone accustomed to entering homes where everyone disagreed about what was happening. Helen had spent 18 years working with older adults. She had learned early that protection did not mean taking decisions away from people. It meant returning decisions to them whenever possible. Celeste stood. "What is this?" Maeve answered. "We were asked to come because the discussion concerns Mrs. Halstead's safety and property." Wesley closed his portfolio. "I think we're finished here." Tessa looked at him. "Actually, Mr. Prine, I'd like you to leave the unsigned documents with Mrs. Halstead if they're being presented to her. They're preliminary proposals. Then leaving copies shouldn't be a problem." Wesley's expression tightened, but he left them. Tessa placed another folder on the table, not theatrically, one document at a time. Dr. Sloane's assessment, the property deed establishing Marlowe's ownership, copies of financial records, Marlowe's preserved recordings, Nora's written statement, still images and preserved copies from the trail camera. Helen sat beside Marlowe rather than across from her. "Mrs. Halstead, do you understand why we're here?" "Yes." "Do you want to remain in this house tonight?" "Yes." "Do you want Mrs. Celeste Halstead to remain?" The question changed everything. Ronan looked at his mother. Celeste did too. Marlowe's eyes watered. For a moment Ronan thought she might retreat again. Bramble rested his muzzle against her knee. Marlowe placed her hand on his head. Then she said, "No." Celeste flinched, not because the answer was loud, because it wasn't. Wesley stood first. "This has nothing to do with me." Celeste stared at him. He continued, "I prepared options based on information provided to me. They're proposals. Nothing was executed." Tessa looked at him. "That will be something investigators can review." Wesley reached for his coat. Celeste's expression changed from disbelief to anger. "You told me this was manageable." Wesley kept his voice controlled. "I told you there were legal ways to structure a property transaction." You said, "Celeste." One word. A warning. And suddenly she understood what Ronan already had. Wesley was not going to stand beside her. Whatever love had existed between them was less durable than his instinct for self-preservation. Maeve stepped forward. "Nobody is being arrested tonight based solely on this meeting." Ronan watched Celeste. Relief flashed across her face. Maeve continued, "But allegations involving financial exploitation, coercion, and attempted property control are now under formal review. You may be contacted for further statements." Celeste sat down slowly. Tessa turned toward Marlowe. "Willow Hearth is legally yours. You are entitled to decide who remains in your home, subject to whatever ordinary legal occupancy issues need to be handled properly." Then she looked at Celeste. "Your personal belongings are yours. Any disputed marital assets between you and Ronan will be addressed separately." Ronan spoke for the first time in several minutes. "I'll have my attorney handle the separation." Celeste looked at him. "So that's it?" Ronan's throat tightened. No answer seemed adequate for 18 years of knowing someone. "I think it happened a long time ago." Celeste blinked hard. She went upstairs. Helen remained with Marlowe while Maeve waited in the hall. Celeste returned 20 minutes later carrying one suitcase and a smaller overnight bag. Clothes, toiletries, personal items. Nothing belonging to Marlowe. Nothing from the property files. The remainder could be handled later through appropriate arrangements. At the front door, Celeste stopped. Snow fell behind her. Ronan remembered the first apartment they had rented, the cheap mattress. The night she drove 6 hours because he had been granted one unexpected day of leave. The woman before him was not a stranger. That was what made the ending hurt. Celeste looked at him. "I really did wait for you." "I know." Her eyes filled. Ronan did not say it excused anything. He did not say it meant nothing. Some truths did not need to destroy one another. Celeste stepped outside. The door closed softly. Wesley's silver SUV had already vanished down the road. No one celebrated. No one cheered. Marlowe sat at the dining table with both hands folded before her. Bramble remained near the front door for several seconds. He listened to the fading sound of a car on snow. Then his ears relaxed. The German shepherd turned away from the door, crossed the room, and lay down beside Marlowe's feet. No command, no praise, no mystery. Only a dog choosing once again where he belonged. Nothing changed overnight. That was the first lesson Ronan learned after Celeste left Willow Hearth. The house did not suddenly feel healed because one suitcase had crossed the porch. The silence remained. So did the damage. For several weeks, Marlowe still glanced toward the driveway whenever headlights moved between the trees. Sometimes she checked the thermostat twice before bed. Once, Ronan found her standing in the hallway with her old smartphone in both hands, staring at the screen as though she had forgotten why she picked it up. Bramble noticed those moments before Ronan did. The 8-year-old German shepherd had returned to his usual place beside Marlowe, his yellow and black coat bright against the old rugs, silver beginning to soften his muzzle. He never crowded her when she was calm. But when her breathing changed, or when she stood too long listening to some ordinary sound outside, Bramble quietly appeared beside her. No barking, no drama, just presence. Ronan began to understand why that mattered. The legal process moved with none of the satisfying speed found in stories. Detective Maeve Rourke continued reviewing the financial records. Some transfers required explanation. Certain signatures had to be examined. Wesley Prine's role in preparing documents and discussing the property remained under investigation. Celeste was not transformed into a criminal villain by the end of a week. She had representation. She answered questions through the proper channels. Ronan did the same. The divorce began quietly. He did not demand every object they had acquired together. He did not want to spend another year measuring grief in furniture. Their attorneys separated what belonged to whom, what had been purchased during the marriage, and what had never belonged to either of them in the first place. Willow Hearth remained Marlowe's. That was the one part Ronan cared about most. By late February, the deep snow around Lake Evermere began to soften. Icicles shortened under brighter afternoons. Then March arrived with dirty roads, dripping roofs, and the first black patches of soil beneath the snow. Bright Pine Valley looked ugly for about 2 weeks. Nora Bellamy called it mud season. Ronan called it proof winter eventually loses. Marlowe told both of them to stop being dramatic. That, more than anything, convinced him she was getting better. Ronan finished his transition out of active service in early spring. For the first time in decades, no new deployment date existed beyond the calendar. No briefing waited, no aircraft schedule. No bag remained permanently half-packed. He expected freedom to feel larger. Instead, it felt strangely quiet. One morning he stood outside Willow Hearth holding a hammer and realized nobody could order him away from the house unless he chose to leave. So he stayed. He started with the heating system. The old furnace came out first, then the damaged thermostat. A local contractor installed a new high-efficiency system while Ronan replaced cracked weather stripping around doors and windows himself. He repaired the porch railing, installed new locks, fixed the kitchen cabinet that had leaned slightly to the left since he was 16. Marlowe objected to that one. It had character. It had one screw. Character often does. Ronan replaced it anyway. Her bedroom took longer. He removed the storage boxes that did not belong there, sanded one wall, and repainted the room a warm pale yellow. Marlowe stood in the doorway when he finished. For a while she said nothing. Then she walked to the window. "You remembered." "Remembered what?" "The color." Ronan shrugged. "You complained about the old one for 15 years. I mentioned it. Every Thanksgiving. Tradition matters." Bramble wandered into the room, turned in 3 slow circles, and lay down exactly where Ronan had just placed a clean rug. Marlowe pointed at him. "He approves." "Great. I was worried about the building inspector." The old woman's laugh filled the room. It did not sound fragile anymore. By April, Marlowe returned to the Bright Pine Community Library twice a week. Not as an employee. She had retired years earlier. But the new librarian remembered her and asked if she would help organize the children's reading table. Marlowe accepted with the seriousness of someone being appointed to federal office. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Nora drove her into town. Then Nora revived their Wednesday coffee tradition as if 6 lost months could be challenged through stubborn scheduling. Dr. Everett Sloan continued checking Marlowe's blood pressure and medication. At one appointment, he told Ronan to stop calling the clinic every time his mother forgot where she placed her glasses. "She has misplaced glasses since 1987, Everett said. Marlowe looked delighted. "I told you." Ronan folded his arms. "She left them in the freezer." Everett paused. Marlowe lifted one finger. "I was putting away blueberries." That explanation made it worse. For the first time in months, Ronan heard himself laugh without immediately feeling guilty afterward. That surprised him. Guilt, he discovered, could survive long after danger was gone. It told him he should have come home sooner, that he should have noticed something during phone calls, that he should have known. He could not change any of those things. So he began doing something useful with the part of himself that still wanted to repair everything. A retired Marine named Calder Wynne, 62, invited Ronan to help with a volunteer group in Bright Pine that repaired homes for elderly residents and veterans living alone. Calder was a broad, heavy-set man with a weathered rectangular face, thick gray eyebrows, and a white beard trimmed close along his jaw. Arthritis had stiffened his left hand, but he still carried lumber like a man 20 years younger. He wore an old Navy work jacket, denim, and scarred brown boots. Calder had lost his wife to cancer 6 years earlier and had nearly isolated himself afterward. Volunteer work had pulled him back into other people's kitchens, garages, arguments, and lives. He believed fixing a broken stair was sometimes only an excuse to make sure someone had eaten that day. Ronan understood immediately. The group also helped retired working dogs whose former handlers struggled with veterinary costs, housing, or transportation. That part became Ronan's favorite. Not because every dog reminded him of Bramble, because none of them did. Each had its own habits. One refused to walk across polished floors. Another loved pickup trucks but hated umbrellas. A retired detection Labrador stole Calder's lunch twice in one afternoon. Ronan found himself laughing more often. He still returned to Willow Hearth every evening. That mattered most. One afternoon in early May, Ronan arrived home carrying a large cardboard box. Marlowe watched him drag it across the living room. "What did you buy?" "Something useful." "That usually means expensive." "It's for Bramble." The German shepherd lifted his head. Ronan assembled a thick orthopedic dog bed beside the fireplace. Memory foam, washable cover, raised edges. It cost more than any dog bed had a moral right to cost. When he finished, he stood back. "Bramble." The shepherd approached, sniffed the bed, once, then again. Everyone waited. Bramble turned around, walked 6 feet, and dropped onto the old faded rug beside Marlowe's chair. Marlowe laughed so hard she had to set down her tea. "You wasted your money." Ronan stared at the dog. "I've bought equipment that cost more and listened better." Bramble closed his eyes. The argument was over. That evening the three of them remained beside the fireplace long after dinner. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Marlowe was knitting something Ronan suspected would eventually become a scarf, although at the moment it resembled a confused rope. Bramble slept between them. Ronan watched the old dog's chest rise and fall. Then he asked the question that had remained somewhere beneath everything else. "Why didn't you really call me?" Marlowe's hand stopped. She did not answer quickly. Outside, rain slid down the glass in slow silver lines. Finally she said, "I thought loving someone meant not adding to what they were already carrying." Ronan looked at her. Marlowe continued, "Your father was the same way." A sad smile appeared. He could be bleeding and still say he didn't want to bother anybody. Ronan looked toward the fire. "That sounds stupid." It was. Good. It was also how he loved us. Ronan understood the contradiction. He looked down at Bramble. The shepherd had stretched one paw across Ronan's boot without waking. Maybe loving someone also means letting them know when you need help carrying something. Marlowe's eyes became wet, but she smiled. Perhaps we're both learning late. Late is still learning. For several seconds they said nothing. Then Bramble began snoring, loudly. Marlowe looked down. Apparently he has no emotional respect for the moment. Ronan smiled. That small interruption became something he treasured later, because healing did not always arrive as revelation. Sometimes it arrived as laughter before tears had fully dried. Summer came green and bright. Autumn turned the shoreline bronze. Then winter returned to Lake Evermere. Nearly a year had passed since Ronan's homecoming when snow began falling one quiet December morning. Willow Hearth looked different now. not new. That had never been Ronan's goal. The cedar still carried decades of weather. His father's old workbench still leaned slightly in the barn. The porch boards still complained beneath heavy boots. But smoke rose steadily from the chimney. Warm yellow light filled the windows. A pine wreath hung on the front door. Ronan stepped outside carrying 2 mugs. Then he stopped. Marlo sat in the old porch chair. The same chair. Her cream sweater was hidden beneath a thick winter coat now, and a wool blanket covered her legs. A mug of hot chocolate rested between both hands. Bramble lay beside her, black saddle dusted with a few snowflakes. Ronan's eyes moved toward the porch post. For half a second, memory returned without permission. Then he saw what wrapped around it. Christmas lights. Small warm bulbs spiraled from the base to the top. Marlo followed his gaze. "Your father would say those are crooked. They are crooked. You did them." "I know. So apparently talent skips generations." Ronan shook his head. "You planning to sit out here all morning?" Marlo raised an eyebrow. "Are you planning to stand there until spring?" He sat beside her. The chair was barely wide enough for 2. Bramble immediately stood. Ronan knew what was coming. "No." The German shepherd turned and pushed himself between them anyway. Ronan shifted sideways before 80 pounds of stubborn loyalty removed him completely from the seat. "Does this dog know how much he weighs?" Marlo scratched behind Bramble's ear. "Oh, he knows." Ronan waited. "He simply doesn't care." Snow drifted across Lake Evermere. Behind them, Willow Hearth glowed. Ronan had once believed home was a fixed place waiting patiently for a man to return. He understood differently now. A house was timber, land, paper, locks, all necessary, none sufficient. Home was the place where people chose to remain honest after honesty became painful, where pride stopped pretending it could carry everything alone, where laughter returned without permission. Bramble understood none of that. The old shepherd knew nothing about marriage, property deeds, legal investigations, resentment, forgiveness. He knew only that Marlo had once been afraid, and when she was afraid, he stayed. Until one winter afternoon, the man she had spent years waiting for finally came through the gate. Ronan rested one hand on Bramble's warm back. Maybe destiny was rarely thunder. Maybe it was usually quieter. A dog refusing to leave. A mother finally allowing herself to be helped. A son discovering that coming home was not the end of a journey. It was the decision to remain. Above them, smoke rose from Willow Hearth into a clear winter sky. And this time nobody inside was cold. Sometimes the greatest miracles do not arrive with thunder, flashing lights, or an answer that changes everything overnight. Sometimes God sends a miracle quietly. It may come as a second chance we did not know we still had. It may come as the courage to finally tell the truth. And sometimes it may come through a loyal dog who simply refuses to leave someone alone when the rest of the world has stopped noticing their pain. Bramble could not understand money, property, betrayal, or the complicated wounds people create between one another. He did not know why Marlo was afraid or why Ronan had been gone for so many years. He only knew that she needed someone beside her. So he stayed. And perhaps that is one of the simplest lessons God places before us again and again. Love is not always about having the perfect words or being able to fix everything. Sometimes love means remaining beside someone when life becomes cold. Sometimes it means noticing what others overlook. Sometimes it means asking one more time, "Are you really okay?" and being willing to stay long enough to hear the honest answer. Ronan spent much of his life believing that protecting people meant being strong enough to stand between them and danger. Coming home taught him something different. There are battles strength cannot win. Pride cannot heal loneliness. Anger cannot restore trust. And love cannot help someone if it is always kept at a distance. Marlo believed she was protecting her son by carrying her pain alone. Ronan believed there would always be another tomorrow to come home. Both discovered that love was never meant to be a burden carried silently by one person. We may recognize a little of ourselves in them. There may be a parent we have not called often enough. A friend whose "I'm fine" we accepted too quickly. Someone living only a few miles away who feels completely alone. Or perhaps we are the person who has been carrying something quietly because we are afraid of becoming a burden. If so, remember this: asking for help does not make love heavier. Sometimes it finally gives love somewhere to go. God's timing does not always make sense while we are waiting. Ronan came home later than he wished he had, but he came home at the moment when his mother needed someone willing to see what she could no longer say. Perhaps that was not coincidence. Perhaps some doors open only when the heart is finally ready to walk through them. And perhaps God's miracles are sometimes hidden inside ordinary things. A phone call, an unexpected homecoming, a neighbor who keeps checking, a doctor who listens carefully, or the warm body of an old German shepherd refusing to move away from the person he loves. If this story reminded you of someone you love, do not wait for the perfect moment to reach out to them. Call your parents if you still can. Check on the neighbor who lives alone. Listen carefully when someone you love becomes unusually quiet. And if you are carrying something difficult yourself, allow someone trustworthy to stand beside you. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need its message today. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what lesson from Ronan, Marlowe, and Bramble stayed with you the most. And if you believe stories about loyalty, compassion, faith, second chances, and the bond between people and animals still matter, please subscribe to the channel and join us for the next story. May God bless you and the people you love. May He protect your home, give strength to those carrying burdens in silence, bring comfort to those who feel forgotten, and give each of us the wisdom to recognize when someone beside us needs our presence more than our advice. May God guide your steps when the road ahead feels uncertain, soften the hearts that have grown tired, restore peace where trust has been broken, and remind you that even after the longest winter, warmth can return. And wherever life takes you, may you never forget this. Sometimes the miracle is not that the storm disappears. Sometimes the miracle is that God sends someone who stays with us until it passes.